we are joined by LA area Congressman Jimmy Gomez. Congressman, thanks so much for being here. Let's dive right in. I want to start right at 30,000 feet. What is your reaction to the enforcement operations that we have seen across the country in the past couple of weeks since the killing of Renee Good in Minneapolis, and really since the initial wave of anti-ICE protests broke out in downtown LA last June?
Well, we knew that this was going to get bad, and it was only going to get worse because Donald Trump just has an arbitrary number of 3,000 arrests per day. And we knew that they were going to use whatever was in their arsenal to go after individuals. But they're going after individuals not based that they're the worst criminals that are undocumented in our country, which that's what they said that they're originally going to do when they were campaigning. They're going after anybody who looks like me, looks Latino, has an accent, or depends on the job they're doing. Oftentimes at car washes, oftentimes at restaurants, or as gardeners. These are folks that are just working here trying to make a living. So we knew that this was going to get worse. And I also know that it's going to get worse once that $175 billion slush fund from his one big beautiful bill is put into the system to expand ICE and CBP throughout the country. So I think we're looking at darker days ahead, and it's going to become more chaotic and more violent for Americans, and it's going to be very, very dangerous.
Let's dive a little bit deeper into that $175 billion in ICE and immigration enforcement funding. Explain exactly how this would work. You touched a little bit on it, and where the money would go, but really how it would work.
So Donald Trump, through budget reconciliation, passes one big beautiful bill. He took literally money from health care, SNAP benefits in order to give tax breaks to the billionaires and largest corporations, but also tucked in there was $175 billion for ICE and Custom and Border Patrol to expand their operations so that they continue raids across the country. And here's the thing, when you usually have it in regular legislation, there's a lot more guardrails, what they can and cannot do, how many beds, how many officers, how much training they have to have. But in this slush fund, there's no guardrails. So they can use it to exponentially expand this enforcement, his own private police force, where he can send them where he wants. That's why we know it's so dangerous, and that's why I introduced legislation to take that $175 billion and tackle the one issue that is making the affordability crisis even worse, which is housing.
Well, Representative, if those proposed cuts are made to ICE funding, what does the remaining immigration enforcement infrastructure look like? I mean, how does the government handle potentially dangerous immigrants who are in this country, those immigrants with criminal backgrounds?
Well, so they will actually still have the budget that they had before that $175 billion. They will still have to prioritize going after, as they said, criminal who are illegals, who are in the United States. That's where they would have to do. And then they would have to once again put the Custom and Border forces back on the border to handle human trafficking, drug trafficking, the fentanyl crisis, because that's where it's all coming from. You want to make sure that the border is secure. But when you take your eyes off the ball and go into American neighborhoods, not only do you make those neighborhoods more dangerous, put people's lives at risk, but you also leave us vulnerable at the border where we actually should be focused.
So some in your caucus have floated the idea of actually abolishing ICE, and some calling it, quote, beyond reform. Do you think that ICE should be abolished?
I think ICE, we need to start one place at a time. We should start with that $175 billion. If we can't do that, how are we going to actually reform ICE or change it or get rid of it? I think that people are having hard conversations that this should be dismantled and put into a different place, or how they actually redo it. But if you can't deal with the $175 billion that's in a slush fund, it's going to be very difficult to do the rest. So I'm proposing let's tackle the $175 billion first. Let's focus on that money that's going to be extremely dangerous, and then have the debate, because people are willing to have the debate. But if we can't do that $175 billion, I don't think you ever get to that abolish ICE position.
Well, Representative, speaking of changes to ICE, your congressional colleague Eric Swalwell made headlines over the weekend saying that if elected governor of California, he would revoke the driver's licenses of ICE agents in the state, and that they would lose their immunity. So do you stand with Swalwell on those statements, those proposals?
I do. And I think we should also look at, I know New York is looking at doing one additional thing, allowing individual citizens and residents to privately be able to sue ICE and ICE agents, CBP agents for violating their rights or abusing them or killing somebody. So we want to make sure that there's every single disposal. This is a rogue agency because Donald Trump is trying to turn them into his own personal police force, his own national police force. So I support what Eric Swalwell is doing. I'm actually the chair of his campaign for governor. I think he's the kind of person we need to fight back against Donald Trump because he knows what's at stake, especially in the coming year, but the 2 years afterwards. Even if we win the majority, Donald Trump's going to get more belligerent, more aggressive, and attack California, the people of our state, even more.
Well, Congressman, while you have you, let's move to this right here. Tensions are mounting over President Trump's plan to acquire Greenland. Now, next month, he is threatening 8 European nations opposed to the idea with a 10% tariff. That tariff would rise to 25% in June if there was no deal for the U.S. to buy Greenland. European leaders fear these threats could really damage economies around the world. Listen.
The measures threatened over the weekend by the United States administration will not help improve security in the Arctic. In fact, they risk the opposite.
The best outcome is for the U.S.
Okay, so Trump has said that the U.S. needs Greenland for security purpose. However, text messages released today from the president to the Norwegian prime minister suggest that the effort may be connected to his failure to win the Nobel Peace Prize.
So, Congressman, as all of this is playing out, last week you introduced the Greenland Sovereignty Protection Act that would prohibit federal funds from facilitating the invasion, annexation, or acquisition of Greenland. Why is this an important step to take, and what do you say to those who are claiming that acquiring Greenland is, in fact, in our national security interests?
I think we need to push back on a rogue president, somebody that's operating outside the bounds of the law and the Constitution, somebody that's more interested in himself than the actual security and the well-being of the American people. And we know that if he invades or takes over Greenland, he is going to shatter NATO, one of the greatest military alliances in world history, something that has been in place keeping the peace. And if he does that, it's going to make us worse off, because that means we're going to be divided in our attention. We're going to be pulled away from the Middle East. We're going to be pulled away from Eastern Europe. We're going to be pulled away from Asia. And then people are going to start questioning. Our allies all over the globe are going to question, are we next? Is the president of the United States going to actually attack us? Is going to try to invade us? Is he going to say, I want that because it's in the interest of the United States? Remember, Putin invaded Ukraine because he said it's in the interest of Russia as a security interest. So once we go down this road, not only do we break up our alliances, we also break up the word of the American people and the United States government. And it also damages the United States when it comes to our economy, because people will no longer believe that we are a stable democracy based on the rule of law. So everything's at stake, and we need to make sure that we prevent this president who is operating outside the bounds of the law, that he cannot do what he wants to do just because his feelings are hurt. And the fact that Norway as a government doesn't decide who gets the Nobel Peace Prize. So this is only about him and his ego and how he kind of sees himself in world history.
Okay, so let's talk about this then. Whether it's Greenland or the ICE funding bill, ultimate passage into law will actually rely on President Trump's signature. So do you think that you have veto-proof support for either bill?
Well, one of the things that I'm doing is trying to make sure that we put Republicans on the spot. If we can actually get it into funding bills, then he has to decide, does he shut down the government or does he sign the bill? That's why we go for putting limitations on how federal funding is used. It's going to be up to him. My job is to get it through the House, get it through the Senate, and then put it on his desk. The American people every single day are starting to see that this is an unhinged president. At the same time, Republicans need to start acting like Republican and not Trumpistas that do whatever he says whenever he wants them to do it. They have a role to play. They were elected by the people of their districts and their state. So they actually have to exercise authority. And every single day, you're starting to see that break in that coalition on the right. It's not there yet, but every day we're going to take it one step further.
And no doubt the conversation will continue. Congressman Jimmy Gomez, thank you for joining us, sir.